All right, thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, we've been meeting over the summer with the Metro Crime Initiative to discuss all of the issues facing our communities as it relates to public safety. We had a group of key stakeholders who met, who engaged, and came up with smart and measurable and actionable solutions to all of the issues that are plaguing our criminal justice system. So today, we're happy to have some of those folks with us, some of them who were not able to join us, but we know that they're supportive of the initiative. So I'd love to welcome the person who coordinated this effort, Mr. Mayor Tim Keller.
Well, I want to thank first and foremost everyone for being here today. And you know, it's really full circle. I think when we started this, we had about the same number of folks and of course the same institutions. And then, you know, we've been through some ups and downs with COVID and so forth and switched to Zoom. But first and foremost, the folks who are here personally, just want to thank you. Of course, many of us all work together and see each other every day, if not every week. And so appreciate everyone's personal effort today to be here. But let me begin by saying that, you know, together we have really laid out a set of action items that we've established in the Metro Crime Initiative. And this agenda is about clear actions that we can take across the criminal justice system. And also in the short term, these are things that we believe will help turn the tide on violent crime in our city, again, in the short term and for each step of the criminal justice system. Now, I also want to state that, you know, this work is a reflection of each of us believing that violent crime is unacceptable. We are all sick of it, no matter what piece of the criminal justice system we are in. And we're also tired of the dead ends, and I think we're also tired of the one-off efforts by all of our agencies. We do our best on our own, but now we're standing together. And we're also going to hold each other accountable to do our part. Now, I do want to mention what you see, whether it's the checklist here that we've provided or the information that we're going to be sharing with you. These were the outcomes of the Metro Crime Initiative. Now, it doesn't mean that every institution absolutely supports every item in there. I want to be clear. The logos that you see behind me, the people that you see in this room, they believe just one thing, that we need to work together to keep our communities safer. And those two things are very important, safe community and work together. It does not mean that they, you know, support every single initiative in there. Although I will say there is broad consensus for many of these items. And so that is why we have a legislative process, a city council process, a county commission process to marry those interests and figure out what the best path forward is for our community. Now, we launched this initiative early last summer to do exactly this, to stop the finger pointing also between components in the criminal justice system. We all know we have things we can do better. I will just speak for Albuquerque. It's absolutely true, and I know our chief agrees with me. But what we're going to do is support the other entities in the criminal justice system in their needs and in their asks. And of course, we're also asking them to support what we need to do at our police department and at the city of Albuquerque. So for us, we also know that just weeks into MCI, the Metro Crime Initiative, our city faced a spat of senseless violence, something that has been happening, unfortunately, even before the pandemic, but more so after the pandemic, and in those terrible weeks in August, when we saw 4 people, we had 4 individuals wounded at, of course, the sports bar. We had our 13-year-old Benny Hargrove, who was killed outside of his school, and we had 4 officers injured in the line of duty, 3 shot by a felon fleeing California. Now, thankfully, all 4 of those officers have pulled through. But our community is heartbroken. Our community is frustrated. Our community is angry. Our community is fed up with violent crime. And now I believe that everyone here with us today, throughout the Metro Crime Initiative process, feels and understands that we hear those emotions. And now we also have a call to action. So I want to thank all the participants and everyone in the community who shared in this input for these pressing challenges that even in the process of our 5 sessions, we saw became more and more pressing each day. Now, we had hard conversations that had not happened before, especially in a public venue. And we also know that we've got some results early on. The state police partnership and what we've seen its benefits with respect to warrants and also even traffic issues throughout the city. Our state police, this round of partnership with the city of Albuquerque has been very fruitful. Thank you, Deputy Chief, for that work, and the state police. And also the courts, they announced their pre-trial monitoring today. And I think that's a good example of, that's one of the items we actually have on our crime fighting agenda. And so we're going to go ahead and check that as done. And so that is a great thing that the courts stepped up, and also in a timely way. The fact that they're implementing this in October, we're especially grateful for as well. So we're already seeing some fruits of the Metro Crime Initiative, but we have a long way to go. In total, there are 40 different recommendations here, but I want to emphasize that we tried to make these recommendations essentially binary. We either accomplish them or we do not. And that's part of having accountability going forward as we address this in the different venues where it needs to be addressed. Now, the agenda we're releasing today represents some shared priorities from our institutional partners that were developed over the past 5 sessions. And I mentioned that at least the topic we all agree is critical that we address. The exact answer and where we land on tough conversations around pretrial detention, around the CMO. This is what we're going to have to figure out. But what we agree is that we've got to have those discussions, whether it's at the legislature, and we have to agree on where we're going forward, and that the status quo, the criminal justice system right now, is not working for the Metro Albuquerque area. So for us, our first priority is to advocate for all of this in every venue possible going forward. That includes a possible special session, it includes the 30-day session, and it includes everything in between, from county commission meetings to city council meetings to just management meetings at some of the respective departments. And I also want to highlight that the partners came together who are often at opposite ends of the courtroom. I want to acknowledge it. You do not see the individuals that you saw participate in the Metro Crime Initiative often hashing out these tough issues together. And so I also want to emphasize that in many ways this is a living list. It will be revised and updated as new ideas come to fore, and also as agreements are made between entities that are often in opposition. But again, the key measure is, did we make a difference? Did we change what we're doing today on these 40 issues so that it is better tomorrow? That's what the Metro Initiative is all about. So for us, we're looking forward to a focused agenda. And I know it might sound like 40 items isn't that focused, but I will tell you, when you consider the challenges that we're facing, narrowing it down to these is actually a strong accomplishment in and of itself. So we're going to hear more details on this from our subject matter experts. But let me just at the high level mention, when it comes to fighting crime, we've got to fully fund our public safety agencies. And especially our legislators who took part in this. I want to thank them, especially for this, because a lot of that is going to fall on them. But I know that this year, fortunately, the budget situation is looking much better at the state level, and we have an opportunity to finally fully fund some of our public safety institutions that have been lacking in terms of whether it's number of officers, whether it's modern crime fighting technology like ShotSpotter, or whether it's helping businesses with cameras and lights and fencing, something our economic development department is currently doing. Or it's our partnerships with auto theft and felony warrants, and understanding basic concepts like we should never have a huge outstanding warrant backlog. The reason why we do is fundamentally because of lack of resources. And that is what we have the opportunity to fix in the upcoming 6 months. This also means addressing gun violence. And we know that we have to hold dangerous criminals accountable and behind bars. Now, where that line is, that is what we're going to argue about going forward. But we have a commitment to, I believe, say that if you commit a gun crime, you should go to jail. And treating gun violence as a public health issue is also absolutely critical. And we saw this in the Washington middle school shooting. We've got to understand that gun safety laws do save lives. And we've got to have the legislative initiatives that have been on hold that support things like parental gun safety. We have to have those fixed this year. And we've got to close the loopholes in the red flag laws that have come up just in the recent shootings this week. We also have to close the revolving door. Fixing 24/7 monitoring is a good start, but we know we also have to revisit how we utilize grand juries when we have huge backlogs. We know we also have to revisit how the CMO works in situations of violent gun crime. And we have to make sure that our courts have the resources and our parole offices have the resources to match the crime that is going on in our community. And we also have to strengthen violence prevention. We've got to strengthen diversion and behavioral health. We know that the root cause is the right answer in the long term. And we have to pair that with these other items that we've talked about in the short term. But this means expanding our violence intervention program statewide. It means expanding things like Turquoise Lodge. And it means even doing what we're trying to do at the Gateway Center right here in Albuquerque. And it means increasing the use of diversion programs and bringing back and enhancing and utilizing specialty courts like teen court and drug court. These are ways that we can also attract and demonstrate a commitment to professions that we are desperately in need of when it comes to social workers and behavioral health professionals. So going forward, we as a metro area, we're going to keep score on what's been done and what hasn't been done. Now, I want to hand it off to one individual who asked to speak today. He offered to help, and he is someone who normally has not been on our sort of run a show in the Metro Crime Initiative. But I want to ask Sergeant Kinney to work his way up to the podium. He is one of the officers who was shot a little over a month ago in a terrible incident, and he's standing here today because of his bulletproof vest. Otherwise, he would not be here today. We are absolutely grateful for you, Sergeant, number one. I want to emphasize this is, of course, the incident when the offender who shot at our officers fled from a halfway house in California. He came to our city within days and got his hands on a firearm and enough ammunition for a prolonged gun battle that wreaked havoc on our community. So we're grateful these officers have pulled through, but I also just want to acknowledge Sergeant Kenny saved dozens of lives, if not more, that day. He and his team taking action when they needed to, literally putting their lives at risk, is the quintessential example of being a hero in our Albuquerque Police Department. So we are grateful you were there. And I know the victims, not the victims, but the bystanders, as I shared with you earlier, they personally want to extend their gratitude to you. I know two individuals now who are in that drive-through line, and they owe their life to you and those other officers. So, Sergeant, thank you. We'd like to hear a few words.
Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. As the mayor said, first of all, thank you guys for inviting me. My name is Sergeant Sean Kenny. I'm with the Albuquerque Police Department. I've been here since 1999. I initially started in law enforcement with the University of Mexico Police Department in 1995. Graduated from Class 13 of Bernalillo County Sheriff's Department shortly thereafter. Lateraled over here in '99. And I honestly think I was less nervous going to the call where I got hit than I am right now, so please bear with me. I have spent the vast majority of my career in the field, both as an officer and as a sergeant. I was promoted to sergeant in 2006, and I've been, other than a short stint in the gang unit, street gangs, I've been a field sergeant the entire time I've been there. I have literally seen and experienced and dealt with all the problems that we are talking about here today. I have been there firsthand when people have been shot, when people have been stabbed, when kids have been abused. And I'll be blunt, it takes a toll. It takes quite a toll to see that time and time and time again. I'm going to touch real briefly on the incident of August 19th. There'll be hopefully further information down the road. We're still investigating. Normally, I'll be very honest with you guys, I would have been in my office doing paperwork when this call came out. The call came out as an armed robbery at Manzano High School. That obviously piqued my interest. It's a couple blocks away from the substation. And very quickly thereafter, they said, hey, no, the robbery was about 30 minutes ago at another location. So I kind of went back to what I was doing. And I'll tell you why in a second. Shortly thereafter, I get a call because there's a complaint. One of the people that we've stopped that we think is involved is their sister's calling to complain they want to talk to a sergeant. And sometimes we stop people and they're not involved. And to me, you apologize and say, explain why you did what you did and move on. So I went out there to talk to the sister. Just as I got there, I was told, hey, she left, she doesn't want to talk to you. Okay, cool. I'll head back to the sub. And right then is when Mario called out and said, hey, we have eyes on the people who the victim says is the offenders. So we all headed down that way. I came around the corner at Wantabo and I believe Summer by Big O, and I see Mario and James Eichel running down the alley. Real quick, I would absolutely like to thank James Eichel for showing up. He didn't have to. He is not on my team. He does not work for the Foothills. He was there to help, and thank goodness he was, because the thought of Mario going down that alley by himself, I don't know what would have happened. If the suspect could have just focused on Mario, it could have got really ugly. When I saw the run down the alley, I whipped a U-turn. I'm heading southbound on Wantabo, and I can hear the gunfire in my car over the radio, and there's a lot of it. Stopped right as I turned onto, I believe, again, it could be Mountain or somewhere, I don't recall right now, and I threw on my rifle plate carrier. Rifle plate carrier is something, cute little sidebar, the department ordered about 5 or 6 years ago for the emergency response team, which I was on since pretty much its inception. It's a rifle ceramic plate, very lightweight. You can wear it for hours. It's super comfortable. It's rated to stop rifle fire, not just pistol fire, and that becomes critical later on. I threw that on, pulled into the Dutch Brothers parking lot, and saw Harry. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know where anybody was. I put my car in park, and I'm going to tell you guys, I want you to hear it straight from me. I don't have video of this incident. I don't. I had my camera on my regular shirt, and when I threw my plate carrier on over that, it either turned it off or somehow managed to shut the camera off. So I was in the process, I didn't know it was turned off, of going from my shirt to my plate carrier when the suspect popped up to my right. I'm in my driver's seat. I'm not ready for this. I bailed out of the car. I watched my camera go skidding across the pavement, and the thought literally that goes through my mind is, by now Harry and the suspect are shooting at each other, is I'm going to get in trouble. That's the first thought, other than oh bleep, when he came around the corner, that came out of my mouth, came into my head, is I'm going to get in trouble because I don't have camera footage of this now. I didn't know the camera was off. I didn't know at the time. Got off a couple rounds initially by the front of my car, realized I was very close to Officer Gunderson. Didn't want to be that close to him so he could just focus on one of us. I went around to the back. I was going to try and flank him, and I realized that there is a ton of vehicles in the Dutch Brothers parking lot, and they're all occupied. I can see their faces. And so kind of backtracked, came up with another plan. I don't know for sure, but the gun battle lasted 1.5 to 2 minutes, which was really, really long. And I will also tell you, at some point he reloaded. And I'll tell you, the thought that went through my brain when Harry yelled that is, these guys don't reload. They never have extra ammunition. I've taken hundreds of guns. Half the time they're unloaded. Most of the time they have 2 or 3 rounds in them. And this guy's reloading. That doesn't happen. So we did what we had to do. 27 years of doing this, I have done some crazy stuff. That was by far and away the most terrified I've been in my life. Didn't think I was going to see my wife and my son again. It was beyond anything I'd ever dealt with. And I've been doing this a long time, vast majority of it in the southeast area on Graveyard. So I've dealt with a lot. So we got him into custody, we slapped a chest seal on him, and I'm standing there, and one of the other officers, Justin Jones, comes up and he does a blood check. It's what you do after a gunfight to make sure you're not hit, because of the adrenaline you don't know. And he goes, hey, let me check you. For what? I'm not hit. I had no clue. No idea I was hit. So he looks and he goes, points right in the center of my chest, hey, is that hole new? Yeah. What hole? I look down, I don't remember seeing it. He starts feeling around, he's like, I think you were hit. Sure enough, I got a little notebook, he pulls it out, it's got a hole in it. And I'm like, yeah, I was hit. And I'll be blunt, I was a little foggy from there on out. And hopefully we'll be able to provide more details down the road. But I just kind of wanted to touch on that with you guys, because here's a gentleman, I shouldn't use that word, Ramirez, who came to our state several days prior. Probably shouldn't have been out based on the arrest record that I saw. This guy absolutely planned. 100% he knew what he was doing. 100%. He had a ton of ammo, he had a ton of magazines, and he was ready to go to war with somebody, whether it was us or the people that he robbed. And he ambushed the first 2 officers, kind of ambushed us, although I think, frankly, we probably surprised each other. And I have no idea what he would have done. He just got into a gunfight with 2 officers shortly further up the alley, and he comes into this parking lot loaded with cars that are easy to carjack. Who knows what he would have done? I have no clue. But The pendulum, I'm gonna be very honest, has swung way too far. In 27 years, I'm all about second and third chances. Some people actually deserve them. Some people absolutely should be given that chance. Some people should not. Violent criminals who use a gun have no business on our streets, 100%. If they're gonna shoot at 4 officers in a stand-up gun battle that's just about 4 minutes long between the two of us, what are they gonna do to everybody else? They're not gonna hesitate, and that's why we have 80+ homicides in this city right now. Things have to change. The system has to change. And I'm gonna say it right here in front of everybody, and they don't know I'm saying this. I'm challenging everybody in this room, everybody on this list, to do better, because everybody can. From the brand new P2C who makes that first arrest to the governor and everybody in between, we have to do better because we are failing. Everybody's failing. APD is failing, everybody. We're failing. We have a murder rate that is through the roof. We're failing. That's what we're doing. And so this has to change. This has to improve. We have to make dramatic, tough decisions across the board. For APD, I will tell you right now, these 2 things right here are huge. More officers, retain. We are losing a ton of officers. And I'll tell you why. People aren't going to want to hear this. It's the consent decree. The consent decree is forcing officers to leave. That's just the honest to God truth. There's a whole, I see it in the media all the time, oh, you know, they're just leaving this, and that. It's the consent decree. I talk to most of them, 75 to 80% of them, it's the consent decree. I'm not opposed to reform, I'm not. The people of this country have spoken in the last couple of years. They want police to do their job differently and better. Cool, I have no issues with that. But it's gotta be smart, it's gotta be intelligent, it's gotta be workable. It cannot be where we literally do this to somebody and that's 12 to 16 hours I'm stuck at my desk doing paperwork. That's not the answer. It's not at all. We have to fix stuff. We need more folks in APD. We need to alter the consent decree, and we all need to do better. That's my message. I hope it resonates. I hope people understand and listen. And I've been told we have a very tight time frame, so I'll wrap it up. I can't take questions yet, but I promise you I am not done speaking on this. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you all. Thank you all, and I will be watching.
Thank you so much, Sergeant Kenny, and thank you to your wife and your son for sharing him with our community and for advocating for the police department. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And of course, I'm going to start acknowledging some folks who've joined us, who were part of the Metro Crime Initiative. And once I start doing that, I'll inevitably forget somebody, so please let me know if I did. So we have City Council President Cynthia Borrego. We have legislators Marion Matthews, Pamela Herndon, Javier Martinez, Mo Maestas, Jerry Ortiz-Pino, Meredith Dixon, Gail Chasey. We also have Nick Maestas from Ben Ray Lujan's office. We have the Attorney General, Hector Balderas. We have Deputy Chief of the District Attorney's Office, James Grayson, Chief Public Defender Ben Bauer, Dr. Duran from New Mexico Highlands University, Jeff Holland, Secretary of Public Safety Jason Bowie, and State Police Deputy Chief Robert Thornton. And of course, as I said, if I've forgotten anyone, I will get to you. We also have our CAO, Sarita Nair, who oversees the Albuquerque Police Department. So thank you all for being here. Next up, I'd like to welcome the Attorney General, Hector Balderas.
I'll be brief. I know that there are some wonderful professionals that I'd like to share their stories with the rest of the press corps. I think I want to emphasize a couple of things. I think that this is a different type of strategy, and its intention is to step away from the system and really look under the hood of the entire justice system. And I want to commend the mayor for really calling that to action, because a lot of us fight crime, we try to prevent crime, we try to intervene on behalf of victims, we litigate, we investigate, and we prosecute every day. But a lot of times we do that as individual agencies, and so it's real easy to look at other agencies and develop a culture of blame. And I really want to commend the mayor for really putting his foot down and saying, first and foremost, the culture of agencies blaming has to end. And the entire justice system has to look at each other with its renewed purpose of saving lives in families that are victimized, and saving the lives of individuals who are criminalizing their behavior in their community. And I think if you look at these solutions, I want the press to really focus on this is really an out-of-the-box strategy, because the mayor has really brought us together to say, not only are we going to look at our own accountability among agencies, but the response must proportionally match the crisis. And the only way we can proportionally match the crime crisis and the wave is for agencies to begin not only to work together in terms of improving communication, but our strategy must be interdependent. We must be able to step away and look at the stats and realize where there are weaknesses in our justice system. And so the strategy is different. And the mayor's setup here allowed us to have more honest conversations by truly looking under the hood of our justice system and figuring out where our weaknesses are. That does not happen every day. Many times, as the sergeant was talking about, we are responding to critical situations and being reactive. And so this proactive strategy of an interdependent proportional response is key. And then the second area I'd like to maybe focus on, that I don't see this every day, even as the chief law enforcement officer, is having more political, honest conversations about where our failures are. For instance, many of us as individual agencies have known that there is a lack of funding shortage in prevention and drug treatment. In other words, we have three choices in our justice system, and we are absolutely failing in these three choices. Number one, we can choose to just protect this child before they are harmed. And right now, we can't keep track of even children who are committing absenteeism, being exposed to violence at an unheard of rate. Today, we can literally Google reviews of restaurants easier than we can track children in our public education system. And so we will have children going missing on a daily basis from the school system, and yet we will not notify the right authorities for proper intervention. Where is it that we think these children are being exposed to? So we have a choice in our justice system to start to track accountability where we protect a child. Are we truly protecting the children right out of the gate? We are not, because we don't even track absenteeism in this country, in the state of New Mexico. We have absenteeism higher than other states in poverty. And I would argue in these programs that that is probably the one critical strategic area that we understudy. We're still calling it truancy. We're still calling it attendance. But no one is studying absenteeism, as that is probably one of the highest risk conditions where a child will be victimized. And then the second two choices that we have in our justice system is tracking and intervening on victims' behalf, and how we're truly tracking criminals, violent criminals, who are conducting criminal behavior. So those are the three that I think the mayor deserves a lot of credit in changing our strategy and our conversation. And then number two, in terms of having political accountability, having the right proportional response where agencies take collective responsibility for our failures, is truly thinking out of the box. I'm litigating right now opiate litigation among the top distributors and pharmaceutical companies in the world. And what I'm excited to see the mayor bringing together is our leaders who control a lot of public safety funding. Quite simply, prevention, combating violent crime is severely being underfunded. We have prosecutors and public defenders who can't pay their student loans. And so these conversations are going to truly drive out-of-the-box ideas. And finally, my final say is we can no longer have the excuse of lack of funding. We live in an energy-rich state, and yet we have some of the highest child risk factors in the nation. And so I know our legislators will be partnering with potentially the advent of securing opiate funding, which I'm hoping will go directly into treatment, prevention into our public schools. So, Mayor, I want to commend you for bringing us all together and really having a conversation that is refreshing and more honest. And I also want to thank you for giving us a real vehicle to take our frustrations out so that we recharge and we come up with the right, appropriate, proportional response to really protect families and save lives. Thank you, Mayor.
And Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I also want to acknowledge that Roberta Baca from the OSI has joined us, and retired Judge Roderick Kennedy, and I believe Stacy Burleson, who is part of our panel, has joined us as well, so thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Representative Meredith Dixon, who is a thought partner for this initiative. So Representative Dixon, we'd love to hear more from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to say a few words. And first, I'd like to thank the mayor and his team for really pulling together an incredible effort. And I'd like to thank the participants of the Metro Crime Initiative for sharing their insights, their experiences, and their ideas for how to keep Albuquerque families safe. My House colleagues and I recently crafted a comprehensive legislative crime and public safety package that we believe can and will make a real difference. And a lot of the recommendations were ideas that were highlighted throughout this Albuquerque, the Metro Crime Initiative process. By being able to focus on specific recommendations that we as legislators can act on, we were able to bring forth this package. Specifically, I wanted to just mention some of the gun violence reduction work that was a part of the initiative. The rise of gun violence in the city and across the nation is particularly troubling and tragic, and it requires urgent action. We have to work together to keep dangerous criminals off of the streets, especially those who have used guns in crimes. So a few of the recommendations that arose from the Metro Crime Initiative are the presumption of dangerousness if a firearm is used in a violent drug or property crime, sentencing enhancements for felons using a firearm in the commission of a crime, limiting high-capacity magazines, which we heard about the impact of just earlier, and implementing gun-safe storage laws to keep our children safe. I am really pleased and proud to be a part of this initiative. Albuquerque is an amazing community, and I am honored to represent part of it. And I'm looking forward to working together with my colleagues in the legislature, the governor, and all of the partners to make our city safer. Thank you.
And thank you, Representative Dixon. We look forward to working with you in the legislature to accomplish some of these major initiatives that we have next to us today. So to keep us moving, I'd like to hear next from our Chief of Police of the Albuquerque Police Department, Mr. Harold Medina.
You know, I first want to start with thanking the mayor for bringing us all here together. I've been at this profession for 27 years in the metro area, and this is the first time that somebody has successfully brought us all together. I can say this is the first time I sat down with the public defender's office and had a constructive conversation on how we're going to move things forward and how we could meet each other in the middle, and we could develop processes that are going to work for us making a safe community. It's been a tough year. Officers want to do their job, but they can't without accountability for our criminals. And to help those, MCI was a huge step in the right direction. I want to thank Representative Dixon and all the other legislators for sharing our priorities on gun violence. And we see the rise in guns being used in property crimes. We talk about it. Earlier you talked about, we had a sergeant come up here and talk about how a robbery became violent and how officers became the focus. We have to look at this as every time a criminal makes the decision to arm themselves with a firearm, they are a danger to the community, and they are an attempted apprehension away from either hurting a citizen or a police officer. This isn't about pointing fingers, but this is about us admitting that our criminal justice system as a whole needs to be improved and corrected. This is about constructive criticism. I've had to sit down, and I heard from the district attorney the problems that our investigative divisions had, and how I had to make decisions to better train and develop an academy for our detectives so that they could put together better cases for the courts. We had to point out and we had to work with the courts, and I want to thank the courts for moving in the direction of 24/7 monitoring of those individuals that are on GPS. Many things in this list of 40 are important to me as a police chief. This administration has worked very hard and funded 100 new officers every year, but we need to work to recruit those 100 officers and to increase the number of officers throughout the state of New Mexico. We need to find new, innovative ways how we can work with Central New Mexico Community College and how we can make sure that CNM is helping us produce the police officer for 2021, for 2022, and we continue to develop officers that not only are proactive in enforcing laws, but also are working with the community and enforcing and ensuring that we honor the rights of all citizens within the community. We need to have a unified campaign within the state of New Mexico of how we recruit officers and bring them to the state of New Mexico so that they could have a career in law enforcement and help us protect our communities. But we also have to find ways to retain these officers here for longer periods of time and see what other agencies are doing across the country in terms of retaining officers and giving them opportunity at the end of their career to financially benefit themselves, but also to continue to provide a service to the community and not lose 20 to 25 years of experience because somebody hit a time frame where they have to retire. Existing partnerships are working. We know that we made a difference in auto theft by working with the New Mexico State Police and the Office of the Superintendent of Insurance. For the first time in many years, we dropped out of the top 5. It took a lot of work for us to get there. It took almost 4 years for us to get there. But we stayed the course, we worked together, and we're now starting to see the results from those partnerships. I want to thank New Mexico State Police. Their warrant sweep over the past few weeks netted 100 felons being taken off our street who undoubtedly are driving crime. Now we have to work together to continue this, to expand our auto theft partnerships with everybody in the metro area to ensure that we continue to drive down those property crime rates, those auto theft rates. The city has provided opportunity for businesses to link into our real-time crime center so we could get updated suspect information immediately out to our officers, so we could get better video for prosecution of cases. Now the city is working to purchase more cameras for some of these local business partnerships. We're looking to see how we could expand on other community problems. Speeding is the #1 complaint we get as a police department. Although there's a lot of concern with homicides, rightfully so, speeding is the one crime that affects all the community, and mobile speed enforcement is a step in the right direction. We need to free up our officers and ensure that they could tackle the violent crime problems, but we still have to be innovative and find ways to slow down traffic, because every day citizens are lost to traffic accidents, or nearly every day. For 4 years, the city administration has been innovative and had made historical investments in our real-time crime center, license plate readers, shot spotter. The technology I've seen come into this department over the last 4 years has never been matched, and I want to thank the administration for that. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council, for the investment in the safety of the members for the citizens of the city of Albuquerque. The next step is on its way to making the differences we need. MCI is that next step that we've never been able to take. I want to thank everybody who participated in this and the frank, honest discussions that took place, and for the new partnerships we developed. Because I will tell you this, 1 year ago, I could not tell you I would be sitting here telling a group from the media that I had a great conversation with the Public Defender's Office, and we're trying to find long-term solutions to the problems that are occurring in the community. So once again, I just want to thank everybody for coming to the table, being honest, and I just want to remind us all, we have to work together in order for us to fix a system that is failing. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Chief. It is so heartwarming to hear that these conversations are continuing to happen. And I heard that from various stakeholders, that after the sessions, they were actually calling each other up and having discussions. So that was truly part of the meaningful process of this, but the real meaning of all this will be when we can start checking some of these boxes off, right? So next up, I'd like to welcome our Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Albuquerque, Sarita Nair.
Thanks, Alicia. And thanks to you all for being here. When we first did the first round of interviews at the beginning of the summer, we had to sit down with the Ed Board, Attorney General was there, and they asked a very direct question, which is, why do you think this is going to work? After all the initiatives, after all the times we've tried, why do you think this is going to work? And what I said is, we think this is going to work because we've done it before and we know we could do it again. And what I was referring to was, of course, the audit of the untested rape kits. When we did that audit, we went to every city that we selected across New Mexico. State police was there in the room, so I know they're a good partner and they can deliver. When it came time to talk about who we needed to fund, we testified in front of Senator Ortiz-Pino's committee, and we spoke with every legislator who was in office at this time, and they supported the funding to test those kits. And when it came time to talk about who else needed funding, we supported funding for the DA and the PD, because we know that these cases aren't going to move forward if either one of the wheels of that car is not fully inflated, and also for the courts. And so we had that success, and we know we could do it again, especially because we know these partners. We know these folks are committed to doing it. We know they can do it, and we believe we're going to do it again, which is why I'm also so grateful, to just the physical formation that we're in. Sometimes we get into a little bit of a circular firing squad, and it's nice to be shoulder to shoulder with all of you supporting these initiatives. It's also going to work because we've created a living document, and everybody in the community, we want to know that we want to continue to take your input. We want to continue to hear your ideas and your thoughts on these ideas. This is a living document that will continue to evolve. I'm going to speak a little bit about the revolving door. This is one of the commitments that I made to DA Torres, who's been talking about the revolving door for years now and often by himself. So we want to stay inside to side with him and talk about this. He was very public criticizing the move from preliminary hearings to grand juries, and wherever you may feel about that, we're at a unique point right now because of COVID, where we have a huge backlog of criminal cases. And what we're asking is for the grand jury time to be brought back to deal with that COVID backlog, and also to protect victims, especially in crimes like sexual assault, from repeated re-traumatization. And the courts aren't allowed to be at events like this, but I want to say that they've been great partners in talking about these ideas as well. And we also, one of our more controversial areas that we don't have consensus on up here is the case management order. But I want to say again that all the partners here have been willing to engage in conversations about how to make it fair to be here in the 2nd Judicial District, how to treat everyone fairly, and how to prioritize violent crime. And every single partner has been in lockstep on that notion. We also need to stand together to strengthen diversion programs. The city is already funding $1.5 million for assisted outpatient treatment, but we need to increase funding for specialty courts, for Judge Leos's young adult court, for homeless courts, for all of those courts that understand the special needs of the people who come before them. And also a very specific initiative, but one that actually came from conversations with the DA and PD. We're covering the cost of drug testing required to participate in pre-prosecution diversion for those who can't afford it, so the cost is not a barrier. And that's the kind of simple, concrete idea that came out of this initiative that we can all commit to definitely funding and moving forward with. We also talked a lot about our violence intervention program. I want to thank Representative Gail Chasey for being our champion in the legislature on this for several years. Hopefully this is the year we can expand it statewide. I want to acknowledge Angel Garcia, who's here in the room, or was, who's one of the leaders of that program, and Jerry Bachicha. We have great numbers on this. We could do a whole other press conference on it, but it works. It works to intervene with the people who are driving violent crime and to give them the choice between here's some services to change your life, or here's the target enforcement that is going to occur. And so we know this works, and we need to expand it statewide. We also know that the city has stepped forward with 2 big initiatives, the Albuquerque Community Safety Department, which is already launched, and of course the Gateway Center and the homeless shelter within that to help coordinate social services. This is our way of stepping forward in areas that people have been reluctant to tackle. I mean, we know that our officers are shouldered with responsibilities for every type of social ill that occurs in the world, and by creating the Community Safety Department, we have a different type of response that's more likely to lead to better outcomes for both the sometimes the offenders and also for the victims of those incidents. And another thing that reminds me of the rape kit audit is that we're up here advocating for things that we know that the advocates have been talking about for decades and decades. Whether it's Jeff from Endorphin Power Company, who you're going to hear from, and Crossroads for Women, Serenity Mesa, Ms. Burleson, who was here earlier. They've all been talking about this for decades. And so what we're really doing by putting these initiatives up here is saying, we're not going to let you advocate for those in a silo. We're going to take the combined strength of all of our organizations and step up to rebuild that behavioral health system that was systematically dismantled in 2014. That means we need a 24/7 sobering center here in the metro area. It means that we need to expand Turquoise Lodge, which I understand there is some support for. And we need to increase the capacity of our addiction treatment providers, including pursuing federal funding. And we need to build incentive programs to bring more people, not just into policing, but also into the social service careers that we know we need to get better outcomes for folks. And I want to thank Dr. Duran for being here from New Mexico Highlands University. We already have a partnership with them, and the city put $500,000 towards training these types of professionals in the last budget cycle. And Council President will probably look for more this time around, and I know you'll support it. You know, the MCI agenda complements these priorities that everybody's been fighting for so many years, but no one entity can get all of these items against the finish line. We know if we work together, we can get this done, and that's why we're going to support each other in order to achieve all of the initiatives you see in front of you. Thank you so much. I'll turn it back to Lisa.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nair, and I'm so glad and grateful that you acknowledge the advocates who've been working on this for many years. So we're grateful for their input as well. And one of those advocates is Mr. Jeff Holland from Endorphin Power Company. Jeff, can we hear a few words from you today?
For somebody hardly anybody knows. It's all good. Hey. Thanks for asking me to be a part of this. Thanks for everybody being here. A lot of this is very near and dear to my heart as somebody who's been through the system, who's experienced homelessness, who's been in the correctional system. As I drove up, as we noticed, the old jail across the street is no more. 4 South used to be my home, and that was where they housed repeat offenders. And you reflect on that stuff. And I'd like to say I've dedicated my life to trying to address the issues that I myself faced growing up, being the child of a teenage mom, watching her struggle, going to school, learning a lot from my mentors like Dr. Duran, and being around a lot of people who have a shared experience, life experience that really lend to offering solutions to this stuff. And I had some stuff that I was going to talk about, but there's kind of a golden thread that everybody started, so I'm just going to run with it. And that is, we got to come together on this issue. The stuff that we're talking about transcends politics. I mean, it transcends personal beliefs. The people that I was working with this morning, whose family have diametrically opposed political beliefs, all came together to help their son, who was on about his 3rd overdose, and they're worried that he's going to die if he doesn't get help. Like, this is the kind of stuff we're facing. Adverse childhood experiences that our Attorney General spoke about that leads to situations like Chief Medina spoke about, where we have someone running free with guns in the city who came from another state shooting at our officers. And so until we get a hold of putting everything that we need together in terms of all of the service providers, we're going to constantly be running around chasing our tails. And I will admit I was a little disheartened when this process started, that some people just kind of took their ball and went home and was like, oh, I don't see this being talked about or that being talked about, so I don't want to be a part of that. It's not the attitude we need. Like, if something's not happening, if something's not being discussed, bring it to the table. Bring it to the table. That's what we're trying to do, is figure out where we're lacking. Where can we, create stopgap measures that lead to permanent solutions? If the solution in your mind is to just like, well, I'm not being heard, so I'm going to leave, then we're missing a very important voice. And we have communities that have a lot of input. We have women of color. We have the LGBTQ community. We have people with lived experience, peer support workers. All these people have very strong and important voices and lots of experience to bring to the table. And it's important that we make everybody feel welcome as possible. And you know, there's a couple things I'll end with, and it's if everybody likes you, you're doing it wrong. If everybody dislikes you, you're definitely doing it wrong. And we can do it right, or we can do it quick. And if we do it quick, I guarantee you it's not going to end up right. So we need to have a little bit of patience. We need to have a little bit of tolerance. We need to understand that we're planting seeds, and some of the things that we're planting now, we might not live to see the shade that that tree will provide, but if we don't plant it, then we're never going to see change. And so I appreciate the fact that the chief talked about talking with the Public Defender's Department, who need to be talking to the prosecutors, and instead of being about winning and losing cases, let's find the best solution to help the person. You know, instead of saying we want to give them the max or we don't want to give them anything, well, maybe they deserve a little something, you know? And if we can utilize the nudge from the judge, what we call in the recovery community, that's how I got clean. I had the Honorable Judge Blackmare, rest in peace, thought that I needed a little bit of incentive from the correctional side of things because I could no longer care for myself and I could not look out for my own best interests. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but it's true. Sometimes we have to look out for those who can't look out for themselves. So we can make it a partisan issue, or we can say, hey, all of us are no more than one person away from being affected by these issues, and we can come together and we can try and create change, both short-term and long-term. And I think that should be the focus, and I'm really appreciative that we've all come together to at least have the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And as you can see, we had a variety of stakeholders who participated in the 5 sessions from many different perspectives, and we arrived at many solutions. As Sarita mentioned, it'll be a living document that we can continue to add to from folks as well. So I'd love for Mayor Keller to come up and close us out before we get to Q&A.
Well, thank you so much to all of the speakers, and just what a collection of, I think, powerful statements, whether it was from our sergeant to our chief to what Jeff just mentioned and our attorney general and our CAO. I want to just echo, I think one fundamental fact about this. People talk about like what, political courage is and things like that. And I will tell you to stand up here as a collective community in our respective offices and admit our challenges, admit our failures, but also commit to doing more going forward. That is, I think, what all of us expect from our leaders. And I want to thank everyone for being part of that, because it is not easy. It's easy to blame someone else. It's easy to point fingers. It's easy to make excuses. And that is what you will not see in this effort going forward. And that's what the Metro Crime Initiative was all about moving on from. So I want to thank every partner and community member who shared their knowledge and advocated in these sessions. Just a quick acknowledgement of some key staff. Our former U.S. Attorney Damon Martinez has put a lot of work in this. Damon, thank you so much. And also our sort of dueling pianos in the mayor's office, Mike Pulley and Kevin Surisow. Thank you so much for their attendance. Now, I think what we have is a clear work plan for us going forward to turn the tide on crime in the short term and work on those root causes that Jeff spoke about in the long term. And we also know that part of this is about holding dangerous criminals accountability and, when appropriate, absolutely holding them behind bars. But it's also about fixing the unacceptable cracks in the system that lead to the tragedy in the first place. Just as was mentioned, whether it's the adverse childhood conditions or it's the issues around addiction that we face. And going forward, every time there is a homicide, there is a violent crime in our city, every time we have a child killed by an illegal gun, a hit and run incident that is because of speeding and other criminal activity on our streets, we've got to ask ourselves, have we done these things? Have we actually made progress in these areas? That is the measure we can hold ourselves to going forward. And I know that there's all sorts of different documents we're going to share with you, like this one that sort of explains in more detail what these initiatives are that we'll be sharing with the public and individuals here. Or it's looking at some basic checklists, like the one you see beside me that's in this handout right here, This is going to become the blueprint for the next 6 months from our Metro Crime Initiative for the legislative session, for City Council, for County Commission, for our own internal discussions with our crime-fighting task forces. And so we owe it, all of us, to move forward on these initiatives, and we expect to see bills and ordinances lined up against each one of these. And I know the legislature, the caucus in the House, the majority caucus has already started this process. And so we're grateful to have a starting place to go from, and we're excited to put together more to come, be it for a special session in the near future or for the 30-day session coming up. And with that, too, I also want to acknowledge the governor's office. They have been a great partner in this effort, and also our governor personally. She is a believer that the Metro Crime Initiative, she said, if you tell me what you need to fight crime in Albuquerque, and she meant you, meaning all of us together, she said that she will help make it happen. And I appreciate that leadership from the very top of our state. So for us, I think we owe it to all of us to ask ourselves, have we owned up to what it takes to make a difference in the criminal justice system? We have to ask ourselves that question after every major chance we have to either make policy or change actions with our own agencies. We also have to say that if we have not done that, if we have not accomplished what's on this list, why have we not, and when will it get done? Those are the questions we're going to be asking going forward. And again, I also want to thank the courts for them demonstrating this very example of leadership that we asked for. We said we need entities to step up and own their part of the problem, and the courts did that yesterday. And so that, again, takes, I think, both courage, honesty, and leadership to be able to come out and say, yes, this is our problem, and yes, we are going to fix it. And so I want to thank the courts for demonstrating the kind of leadership we need to fix the criminal justice system going forward. Now, going forward, this is a to-do list for us across the metro area and up in Santa Fe. And I know the team and I from the city of Albuquerque and APD and others that we've been working with, we are going to be involved as much as we can. And also, if we're in the way, we will get out of the way. We will do what it takes to make sure that we take action to keep families in our region safe and to honor those who work in the criminal justice system in every aspect of it and in the recovery system, and also honor the victims of violent crimes who demand justice. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Alicia. And I think there's obviously a lot of folks here, so I think you can kind of self-select. If you've got to head out, now is your chance. Otherwise, stick around and we'll do some Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And just a couple of housekeeping items. The Mayor mentioned this brochure here. And of course, each item has support from multiple agencies, but I want to acknowledge that the significance of a logo on the brochure doesn't mean that it's an endorsement of each of those policies. So I just want to make sure that everyone is clear on that piece. If you all need clarification as to who all the folks were at the beginning, because they had masks on when we took the photo, and you need to caption your photograph, come and see me and we'll take care of that as well. All right, let's get to some questions, and then we'll try to field them as appropriate with the team that we have here. And who would like to start? Elise, I can always count on you.
What's the time frame? When do you want to get these things done?
Time frame. Mayor, would you like to address this?
Yeah, sure. I think what's powerful about this is some of the things, like, for example, the 24/7 monitoring, you know, they were able to, they've committed to getting it done in October. So each individual item probably has its own time frame. Obviously, the legislative items are going to correspond to either a special session or the 30-day session. And so really it's dependent on the specific initiative.
When should we check in and see what you've done and what has not been done?
I think there's a wonderful opportunity with respect to the interim committee process, which will be coordinating their respective agendas. And I know for the legislative session with pre-filed bills and so forth. So I think as soon as, October, we should start asking ourselves questions in the end of October. And then, from there on out, just because of the timing of the session and also City Council's year-end calendar and so forth, all of these will be relevant basically every month from mid-October going forward.
And then this is kind of related, but do you just check something off and move on, or are you going to go back and look, like create a 24/7 sobering center, check we've done it, or do you then look at it a couple months and say, how is this working?
I think we certainly want to retrospectively evaluate every initiative on here. There's no doubt about that. And so we'll be doing that. But I don't want to lose the sense of, the bias towards action. Let's actually get a 24/7 recovery center, and then we can worry about how to evaluate it. And I think lots of times there's a lot of analysis paralysis that goes on where we write a white paper, we study it, we have a hearing, we have a task force, and then years go by without actual change. And I think part of the spirit of the MCI is let's actually take the step forward, take the action, and then we'll evaluate it after.
Why isn't BCSO involved?
Sure. So they were invited to every one of these initiatives, and frankly, they're the only one in the entire state of New Mexico who never showed or never applied.
And just to follow up on your question, Elise, we did have representatives from the county
Oh, yeah.
participate. We did have commissioners, county managers, et cetera, staff.
And yeah, the county was great.
For some of the things like hiring more officers or retention that have been challenges over the course of the past couple of years, I guess is there any different approach to it now that's been talked about that may make it more successful?
Yeah, and this is a good example going back to the timing sort of sequence. One is we have new leadership at our academy. That was key. We have a wonderful new director of our academy who came from Quantico, from the FBI. And so we now, I think, have much stronger leadership in our academy. That's number one. And she just started in August. And number two is we have been able to fill our recruiting classes. So we've been able to honor our commitment for 100 new officers every year, and we're on target to do that this year. And so I think that is that shows you how difficult the staffing challenge is, because we've actually done fine on hiring. But we now have an enhanced bonus for laterals because they get into the community faster. So what we're dealing with is really a lead time challenge where it's 9 months to get them into the academy, get them trained, whereas lateral or experienced hires can get in the field much faster. And that has totally dried up all across the country and here. And that's why we're offering $15,000 bonuses for lateral hires. Now, I also want to mention that we're all in this together, meaning I need the state police to have more officers too. And we need every department to be fully staffed. And I think the state police is a good example where both the legislature and the governor's initiative for 1,000 more officers. And we also need our small partners, whether it's UNM or whether it's Valencia County or even the town of Bernalillo. We all need adequate staffing in law enforcement. And that goes for, not only just traffic tickets, but homicide detectives. It goes for domestic violence interventionists. It even goes to folks who do outreach to the homeless community. Those are all part of the need for officers.
I have a question. And I'm not sure who can answer this, but it's talking about violent crime. You're talking about keeping people who commit crimes with guns behind bars. But what about somebody who is a repeat burglar, who breaks into homes, who breaks into cars? Because I talk to those victims all the time. And that feels pretty violent to them. And these aren't people who they haven't been arrested 3 or 4 times. We're talking 16, 17, 18 times. What about those folks? Because they get right back out.
So I'll just mention one thing, then probably either the chief could probably start by fielding this, or if others want to chime in. But the gun connection is really important because that is when it becomes deadly. That is usually when a life is lost. Not always, but usually. And it also, of course, can trigger whether it's taking cases federal and things of that nature. So I think the issue with an actual firearm is statistically that is by far and away when life is lost. And that's where we want to draw a much stronger line in the sand. Chief, you want to add to that?
You know, Nancy, that's a great question, and I think it's important that we recognize that that line in the sand that the mayor spoke about, sometimes that line in the sand is you arm yourself with a firearm, and you're willing to injure somebody. But also sometimes it's just how many times somebody has committed a crime. And I want to thank Jeff because he brought this up, that sometimes you need a little nudge, a judicial nudge to clean your life up. I frequently have lunch with ex-cons, and we're getting ready to do a town hall on cops and cons, we're going to call it. And the conversations I've had with a lot of people who've straightened their life out is exactly that. They got the little nudge from the judicial and they went and spent time somewhere. They got the treatment. I have a personal story where I have a relative who we left incarcerated for 19 months, and it was tough on the family, but in turn they haven't gone back to jail. and now we're going on years. And I think that we have to be tough, and we have to recognize that there are some people that they need that nudge, and we can't be afraid to say that. So yes, without a doubt, somebody who has 18 arrests needs that nudge, and they need that nudge, and sometimes we're going to need everybody to understand that. And I think that's where we're trying to work together to give an understanding to whether it's the legislature who's trying to create laws and ensure that we don't create a pipeline to prison, but also at the same time understanding that balance that there are times people are going to have to stay in custody. So yes, somebody who has an extensive history and they're not cleaning themselves up need that nudge, and unfortunately sometimes that nudge is sitting in jail.
Other questions?
I have another question for the chief, sorry, before he totally sits down. What did you hear from one of the other partners that surprised you, or what did you hear that kind of changed your perspective that you hadn't really thought about before?
You know, the thing I heard is, and I'm going to go back to the public defender's office, is that they desire to have a safe city, and that we have to work together to protect those individuals who have a problem with narcotics and who are looking to straighten out their lives. But every partner that I spoke with had that line in the sand with the violence, that we have to do something about the violence in Albuquerque, and we have to make changes. I'll even look at the legislature that put out some recommendations already. Those are strong recommendations on crime and punishment. So I'm happy to see that we're willing to take that next step to ensure that we're holding people accountable. Because it's not popular to say, but people sometimes, the best place for them is incarcerated. And it's a balancing act the whole time. And I think that we all recognize that, and we're going to have to find that balance as a community. But the diversity of the group is what's going to be the success, because you're going to have both sides pushing and making sure that we find a good common ground. Like Sergeant Kinney said earlier, the mayor said this before, the pendleton has swung way too far to one side, and we need to get it somewhere back in the center. Thank you.
Any last questions before we wrap up? Okay.
I just kind of wanted to touch on accountability again. How often are you guys meeting together as partners to make sure that you're checking in on what's been done, what actions have been taken? Is there a system for reporting on progress?
So what we're going to be doing is lining up initiatives or legislative bills or ordinances and so forth against each one of these. And I'll give you another example is like the speed van question. We need that. That is very important given all the pedestrian fatalities. And so as soon as our city council passes that, then we're going to check off that box, and then we've got to roll it out. And so that's sort of the second piece of it, is when is it actually out on the street? So there's a policy check-in, and then there's a, actually it's implemented check-in. And so that's really what we're going to be sensitive to, and we'll be doing that in the appropriate venues for each initiative. So like it'll be first stop city council, then it'll be our office to get those out on the street. And I think you can sort of mirror that process at the other policy-making bodies.
All right, I think that about does it. I appreciate everyone for joining us today and your patience. Thank you for all of the key stakeholders.
Thank you.
Thank you.